Hello.
Я представлю Якоба по-русски. Это Якоб, он родом из Дании, и он занимается театром и музыкой и будет делать с нами проект по сказкам Ганса Христиана Андерсена. И он хочет представить сам себя и немножко рассказать про то, что он из себя представляет. Yes, Якоб, I made the introduction in Russian, so maybe you say a couple of words about yourself.
Yes, first I would like to say hello. And my name is Jakob, and I'm living in Denmark, the same country from where Hans Christian Andersen is coming. And even I'm living in the city where he was living a few years because he was going to school in my city.
Wow,
it was not a very huge success. It was not a success. But anyway, he was here. And I think it's wonderful you're going to work with his fairy tale, the wonderful fairy tale, we call it in Danish, Tommelise, about this tiny little girl who goes through a lot of difficulties and a lot of problems and a lot of bad things are happening to her, but she will come through in the end. And it is written by Hans Christian Andersen. And I think you will like the fairy tale very much.
I have heard, Jakob, that you will be visiting St. Petersburg also.
Yes. Yes, I'm visiting. I would say that Hans Christian Andersen St. Petersburg is in a way my second home. I very much love St. Petersburg. I've had a lot of friends, Dinara, for example, and Dinara's mother, Sinara. So I have a lot of good friends there, and I have been working with Hans Christian Andersen in St. Petersburg because I've made theater about Hans Christian Andersen in St. Petersburg, and we're working on a project now. And what I would love it was to come and see your project, of course.
That's very beautiful. We are very much looking forward to having you in St. Petersburg, to doing this, and also your perception of Hans Christian Andersen is very valuable, because I think that you can, being in the context of this culture, you understand it in a completely original and authentic way, which will be, for us, it's something extremely important.
Thank you very much. But I think that everybody will understand Tommelise, the fairy tale. So I think we can have something to talk about that.
Definitely.
So we have experience.
I was mentioning to you this yellow book that every grown up knows in Russia. I think it's like 3 or 2 yellow volumes that every Soviet kid grew up on, because it's one of the tales that we were reading and rereading, and I remember my mother reading it, my relatives. Hans Christian Andersen plays a big role for Russian children and for former children. It's important to I think to discuss also, because our perception is different, probably. So it will be interesting.
It's different, but on the other hand, we have something together, because we have some beautiful fairy tales together. We can read and we can understand, and maybe we understand them a little different, but it's not important. So on the other hand, you can say that it gives us something to be together about and together with, and he's a kind of in that way you could say that because his fairy tales are translated and used in so many countries, we have something in common, and I like that way of thinking. So I like that when the children in your kindergarten and all you children are going to make this, that we have something in common. Because I've also been working with it as theater, this beautiful story, also with children in the kindergarten. So I'm looking very much forward to see how you are going to do it.
I also read a bit, I think a writer who wrote a biography of Andersen, he was saying how with Disney and with translating Andersen into English, all of a sudden he was placed in a nursery setting only. So he became like a writer for children, which originally was not the case, that he wrote for everyone in a sense. Is that true?
Yes. You could say that there is actually only a few fairy tales which are real for children, but they can also be written by adults because they have different levels, so to say. But a lot of his fairy tales is absolutely not for children. Not absolutely, but it would be boring for children and too long and very, very difficult to understand. But his, these 10 fairy tales or something which are quite known all over the world, and it's mostly those fairy tales which are very easy for children to understand, or children can have a lot of fun to read them or to hear them. I forgot what I wanted to say.
There are many interesting for everyone, for adults as well, right?
Yes, and actually, no, I know what I wanted to say, that in the beginning, the first fairy tales, he called them fairy tales himself. He said it was fairy tale for children, and it was the first 4 or 5 fairy tales or something. But then he changed and said it was fairy tales and stories. So it's more stories in a way, and it was not especially for children. So it's a kind of misunderstanding that he is a writer for children. But some of it is very funny for children.
Yeah. Well, I think that pedagogues also will be very interested in parents, so we'll definitely all start reading them.
Yeah, that could be a beautiful, simply, if that comes out of the project. And the project we're making at the Palace, I have the same dream that everybody reads a lot of the fairy tales, and then we have something in common. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Could you say a couple of words about the play that will happen at the Palace?
Yes, it's a play about his life, so it's not one of his fairy tales,
right.
But actually he calls his life, my life is as a fairy tale, he says, because he was born and raised up in very, very, very poor. He was poor, his parents were poor, all his family was poor, and they were not only a little poor, but they were really, really poor. It was the social bottom of the community, simply. Very tough life, tough in all kind of ways, I would say. And but very, very early he got the idea that he should be famous. And one of the things why, it was because his father was a very special person. He was able to read, which was very, very not normal for his kind of persons at that time. He could read, and he loved to read, and he wanted to know about the world. He was reading Shakespeare. He was reading La Fontaine. He was following the political situation in the newspapers and so on and so on. Yeah. And he read this for Hans Christian, this little boy. So if you can imagine a boy, maybe 8 years or something, and you read the Shakespeare's drama for him. I mean, it's really, really, really tough stuff.
Yeah, it's effective.
So he has this feeling that he could be a part of this, right, being a new Shakespeare or being a new something. But his problem was that he did not go really to school. He did not like to go to school, and his father was kind of funny, and he said, "Oh, if it's too stupid to go to school, then don't do that. You should do what you really want to."
Progressive. Progressive. That was
progressive. He was in that way because his father. He was very involved in Rousseau. Rousseau at that time, or it's earlier. But he was the one who was the first who talked about that there was a childhood, and in the community, if you see pictures from that time, you see that you can see that the children are simply just small adults. So they did not have an idea about the childhood, and that childhood should be something special. I mean, children was working from they were very, very small and so on and so on. So there was no really childhood for most children.
Yeah.
And so he has had an idea that he should be like a hero in one of these fantastic romance or novels, and then become famous. And first he wanted to be an actor because he wanted to be seen. He wanted everybody to see him, but he was an awful actor. And he wanted to write plays, dramas for the Royal Theatre, and they were also awful. But through many, many, many difficulties, and also because he was not educated, he did not know the cultural rules. He was very bad in spelling. He was writing a lot, but he was very bad in spelling. He was very not educated. And he learned everything himself. And then some very rich and fine people, even the king, gave money to him, so that not that he should become an artist of any kind, or a poet, or an actor, or anything, but that he should be educated to be a good civilian who could take part in the community. And therefore, he came to my city, Slagelse, to go to school. And it is a very, very bad and very cruel story, so I won't tell it, because then you will never go to Slagelse again.
Place.
Yeah.
That was easy.
Yeah. But long before he died, he was world famous, and that was very extraordinary. And actually, he started to write novels and poems, some quite good novels, and some of them some very, very funny poems, and some very good poems too. But then he started to kind of accidentally to write fairy tales, and he didn't really think that this should be his direction. But he saw that he was very good at it, and some of his and some people thought it was genius work simply. Others thought it was terrible, because he was this not educated guy, and he was. If you read his fairy tales and you look upon it at that time's literature, you will see that it's very different. He uses a kind of daily, not daily language, but a kind of. First of all, he uses a lot of direct speak, which was not. And then he describes everything. He describes sounds, for example, boo, a be, a ba, or or wee, or all that. He writes that with letters, and the literature people in Denmark, the critics, thought this was impossible to do. You couldn't do this, because then it's not literature.
Yeah.
Also, they thought that he was that you should never ever tell these fairy tales for children, because they were immoral. They were bad. They had a bad morale. They had a wrong morale. A story for children should be something where you build up to something where you have a point, which is a point that is a kind of moral, that you have to do like this and this. It should educate the children for something. But he's not like that. He wants to set the children free, in a way, you could say. And that's very, very special for this time, for his time.
Aggressive, isn't it? Very
aggressive,
yeah.
And you can, some of his fairy tales starts with listen. So you're not supposed to read it, you're supposed to listen. And therefore the language is different, the subjects are different, and very, very much the points are different. Think about the little boy who's the only one who dares to say that the emperor has no clothes on.
Yeah.
And what do the emperor do? Everybody is laughing, he makes as if nothing happened and just walks on, just like our politicians. They do something awful, and we say, "What did you do?" And they said, they just proceed their work. So he has a lot of. Or if you take this Gans Kloshans, we call him in Danish, where it's all the wrong things he can. His two brothers who had been to the university, one of them can the Latin encyclopedia from the start to the beginning, and from the start to the end, and from the end to the start, and so on and so on and so on. But this knowledge is of no use in life. You cannot use it in life. That's the idea. And so Hans Christian, he finds three things. He finds a dead crow, and even a crow is a kind of symbol of something special. A crow is not a very nice animal. He finds a wooden shoe, an old wooden shoe, and he finds this mud. And with these three things, he finds, talking about ecology and all that kind of things, you just find and you can use it. And with these three things, he wins the princess and the whole and the half of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And this the mud, when he comes to the castle, and he sees that there are some very, very important persons, and he can see how important are, and he thinks they are so important, so they must have the very, very best. So he throw the mud in the face of the most important man, not to be evil, but because he should have the very, very best. So you can see it's turned upside down. Everything is turned upside down.
Very, very, very contemporary.
Yes. So, and people, for example, about this story, of course, the literature critics who were especially saying that children should learn this. I mean, it would end up in a revolution if you an awful thing to teach the children. But this is what makes him. This is why we still want to read him. It's because he is not bounded in his time. He explodes and explore and completely break all rules. He break the rules of writing, of behaving, of everything, and therefore it is still interesting to read him. So if we should say something pedagogical, and not to be misunderstood, but anyway, that when we see that children are trying to explore something which also makes them going over borders we do not like, very often we think that it could be an educational problem, and it could.
Yeah.
It could. But on the other hand, that it's only through breaking rules new things will be created. No new things will be created in the rules we have. So therefore, and this is, in my opinion, the very, very interesting and beautiful things about making things with children. It is that you both think that should be educated to be good civilians, but they should be good civilians in a way so that they actually can see this should be changed, and I will break some rules to try to get it changed. And in my opinion, we often think that when children are, that we very often in Denmark we say they are kind of trying to break rules or something like that. But this is not true. They're not trying to break rules. They're exploring something, because the rules are not the rules should not make their activities. It should be the fantasy and the way of looking upon a world as a beautiful thing where we have a lot of possibilities and so on and so on. So therefore, I think he has so much to tell us, Hans Christian Andersen, and to tell the children, and tell us adults that a lot of the things we say are the most important things, they are not the most important things. But it does not mean that we shouldn't say it. I mean, it's not a kind of we should throw everything away. It's not my point. My point is just that we should take this, that we also should take this, so that we remark, and when we see that children are doing different things, and we try to support and lead and not try to stop, that we also, that, oh, something happened.
Yeah, I was very interested and I forgot.
So, but well, the point is that I think that to grow up with Hans Christian Andersen is a good thing, because the fairy tales you listen to as children, they actually first give a real meaning when you get adults, because there you see how that he wants you to do something. He wants you to think. He wants you to change. He wants you to behave. He wants you to act. He wants you to take action in your own life. And he is himself is a fantastic example of taking action in his own life.
I think he also makes you feel very well, because he describes emotion a lot. The characters, they're very humane. They have, they have feelings, and sometimes it's hard to understand what's happening inside you. Yeah. He makes you, look into these feelings. And
and the humanity is, of course, the feelings, but you see, but most of all, maybe the humanity is the humor. Yeah. Because it's the humor that really makes us different as human beings. I would say that we can that, and he says this very, very interesting thing, that he says that the humor is actually the salt in my fairy tales. And with this, he means that if you're cooking a soup and you have different vegetables in it, and it doesn't taste very much, if you drop salt in it, everything will start to taste not only of salt, but also it would do something with the taste of the carrots or the cabbage or what is in the soup. And what is interesting is that you cannot point it out and say it's there, and you cannot take it away again. You cannot find it again. So his humor is not a kind of ha 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 ha. It's a kind of a life, a humoristic way of see everything in, and it's in the language. It's in the small things in the language. It's never a kind of point, or it is also it's a point. For example, with the boy who sees the emperor, that's a funny point. But mostly it is in the whole text. It is in the whole story. It is the whole philosophy of the fairy tale, and that's. And this is more because fairy tales at that time are very emotional often, and the time is very emotional. So that's not so. Yes, it's fantastic also. But the most different thing is the humor, and the thing which makes him more human or humanitarian. I don't know how to express it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but you understand what I mean. Yes, it's the humor is something very, very, very important. Yeah. And also the salt has another thing. When you put in salt, it conserves it, so that you can use salt as to keep the meat, or keep something keeping a long time. Did you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah. No, and it preserves it and it keeps it together.
Yeah, exactly. So so I always think about this with the salt, because I think it's a fantastic picture of the humor in where it is everywhere, and so I like that very much. Yes,
it's extremely interesting. I'm very excited to start.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. You're very welcome. I love to talk about it.
Yeah, thank